45 years ago, during the summer of '32, the 3-year-old Museum of Modern Art announced the founding of a new department of architecture under the chairmanship of Philip Johnson, and they referred to him as that ardent member of our junior committee. How did you manage to persuade the Museum of Modern Art that a museum was not just for pictures?
I didn't have to persuade them. Back in 1930, we had a very strong leader, Alfred Barr, that's known to every one of you, as the, well, they're old enough to walk, as the leading art connoisseur of our time. And he felt that this town needed a museum that would cover the other arts the way the Bauhaus did in Europe. And there was no reason to contain ourselves just to painting and sculpture, but that we should have architecture. So we started, we laid our plots in 1929 already. It's almost 50 years ago. And I came aboard, and it was not hard to persuade them since I picked up all the bills. It helped a great deal. The Barbara Lee Diamond Stand is my time.
Oh, 6 months earlier you had organized a show before the department opened that was called the International Exhibit of Modern Architecture.
The international style came in about 1922, and it had swept Europe pretty much, but there wasn't much modern architecture in this country. So naturally, as the founding of a new department, we were all convinced, Alfred Barr and I, and Russell Hitchcock, who was with us, and wrote the first catalog, that the international style was what was coming in architecture in this country, and indeed, it's exactly what happened. We didn't any particular kind of structure. It was the look that we were after, and it conquered only too well. And now what you see so boringly around you in New York is all the result of our work in 1930.
Who termed it the international style?
We did. We named it that, and named our book that, and wrote a book called The International Style.
Which we is that?
Hitchcock, Barr, and myself.
Here you were, the first to establish the international style, and now...
The name, yeah.
Yes, and now you are the first, in a sense, to abandon it. You've become, I guess, a prophet of postmodernism.
Oh, much too sweeping.
All right.
I'm not the first postmodernist. There isn't anybody today that builds modern architecture as we knew it 10, 15 years ago. I mean, as pleasant as the Seagram building is, I think that's probably the best building in New York, in the international style. It's still a flat-topped glass box, and that we got a little bit bored with. And then another trouble with the international style was that everything looked like a box. Every church looked like a box. It didn't look like a church. A library didn't look like a library. So it failed of its own propaganda, and but it lasted, don't forget, almost 50 years, which is a long time for a style of architecture to last. The Renaissance only lasted less than that, before Mannerism took over and the Baroque succeeded it. So we feel that the international style was a healthy and normal and marvelous historical period that is the source of most of the things you see around you now, good and bad.
What was the first building that you built, and what was its architectural influence?
My first building was my own house in very late in my life in 1943, wasn't it? Yeah.
42.
42. Your research is better than mine.
This is when you returned to be a student.
When I went back to Harvard to study architecture, my old age, 34, and I built myself a house then when I was a student, which was very Miesian, because I've been mostly influenced all my life by Mies van der Rohe, who was, as you know, the designer of the Seagram building, and for many, many years the leading American architect. But since then, all that influence has dried up, and we think Mies now is too boring to worry about.
You originally studied Greek and philosophy, came to New York to work at the Museum of Modern Art, and then returned as a student, already well known as a critic and an art historian.
That's right.
Wasn't that an unusual role to be in? Was the head of that department then Walter Gropius?
Yes, Walter Gropius, whom I never liked at all, was the head of the department at Harvard, but it was the best school to go to in 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 1930. 40. So I went up there, but we didn't speak.
What was happening in that period at Harvard?
International style houses, wooden houses. And we all designed wooden houses under Breuer, who was a great teacher. Marcel Breuer, you probably know that name too, was a famous man, still around. And I just went backwards into my profession, that's all. It's just as good as going forwards. You all come out the same place. Life doesn't begin till you're 70 anyhow, so it doesn't really make much difference whether you go to school first and then work, or work and then go to school. See?
I guess it was Calvin Tompkins who has said that you have always been your own best client. Because
I told him that's a good line.
Soon after the Cambridge house, you built another house for yourself. One that, at least...
Oh, the glass house?
Yes.
Yes, that I built in 47, 48. That's where I still live.
Can you tell us about the now legendary glass house that even Vincent Scully calls one of the most important 20th century forms?
Does he really?
Yes.
I like to get some of these quotes. It really busts me up. I didn't know that. No, it's an important building, and I'm giving it to the National Trust so everybody will get to see it. I've had to close it because it got too popular, but it was great. I had many years of entertainment and fun there before I knew you, I guess, because you haven't been out there, somebody told me. We repair that, but you can't come. But it's all glass, and it's wonderful. Saturday, remember the day it snowed all day? Or was it Friday? Saturday. It was the most beautiful day we ever had in the glass house, because you could sit there all nice and warm with a roaring fire, and all around you, the sky would come down in these little droplets that you could watch like this. So you felt as if you were in an elevator going up through all those snowdrops, you know? It was terrific. I mean, you can have sun all you want, but when can you get that type of snow? And if you look out this way, it's snow. You look out that way, it's snow. You look out that way, it's snow. The advantage of being in a glass box. It's a good way to live.
In that glass house, there is something that is often referred to as the processional element in architecture that then recurs in a great deal of your work.
Light Dawn. She is, of course, a scholar and has done all the work necessary for this. My whole main impulse in architecture is what I call the procession, the hierarchical arrangement of spaces. To me, the architecture exists only in time and in footprints, walking, not automobiles. You can't see art from automobiles. They're a great invention. I use them all the time, thank you. But not for architecture. The way you walk toward a building, the way you are turned aside, the processional element as you get off the avenue here and climb over that snow, slipping, is a very important part of the architectural feeling, whether I'm going to enjoy this building. I did not enjoy this building. You see, the processional part was wrong. And then to come into an assembly hall this big through those particular entrances and doors, I'm not insulting anybody because this no doubt was not designed by anybody, is demeaning. I mean, that's why I built the State Theater the way I did. I wanted to be able to go in, I'm going to have a good time in this building because I got Baroque stairs to go up, and I've got the longest bar in New York, and we've got all those beads dangling, and there must be something going on here. So you get a feeling, and then as you go up those stairs, that's the right way to do a theater, I still think. You go up the stairs and come out, and as you come out and talk in the intermission, it gives you the pause that refreshes. You don't get that in most New York theaters. You step out and trip over the box office and kill all the people trying to get your cigarettes out. So we think it's nicer to have a little sense of procession. Now, in my glass house, it's just the same. It's not a theater, but it's the same idea. You approach it at an angle. You come in through the door into a vestibule. It isn't. It's all one room. But all these memories occur to you as you pass through the space. And you arrive, the living room is just a raft of white carpet. You step up onto the carpet, and then now I'm in the living room, you see. And so gradually I believe a dog is the nearest thing you get. When a dog wants to sit down, you know what he does? He doesn't go and sit down. He'll round, comes around, and usually makes 2 or 3 circumambulations and then sits down in sort of a curl. Well, everybody does that in their minds. I mean, you sort of, where's the grandfather's chair? Where do I sit? How do I feel in this environment? See? And when the chairs are exactly the right thing to each other, relation to each other, we're just right, by the way. the brilliant people here did that correctly. See, we still talk to you, but we're not facing each other. See? All those things are so subtle and so absolutely important that that how these arrangements and how you do actually physically sit down becomes the main part of architecture, more important than just sitting there and looking at it. If you come to a Greek temple, you always approach from the back, for instance, and make a 180-degree turnaround to the front of the Parthenon, for example, on the Acropolis. On a Gothic cathedral, you come through narrow streets, and you're opened into a plaza that's too small from our point of view, but not from their point of view. They knew exactly what they were doing. It impresses the inevitable size of those Gothic cathedrals to huge size. See? And so you are impressed as you were supposed to be, and then, of course, you burst through the front door into that enormous height. The Baroque sense of procession was quite different. The Piazza of St. Peter's in Rome is the grandest square in the world, but the church is not so important at one end. It's the great arms that just sort of gather you, and I must be in the most important place in the world. It just says it to you. But how different from the Greek way or the Gothic way. In other words, everybody has their own kind of a procession. Well, look at the Egyptian kind. Through a darker and darker and darker, thinner hole, right to the Holy of Holies. Absolutely straight line, going through these hypostyle halls that go around you like this. Well, it seems to me that that's what architecture is all about, and it can be applied almost to everything except maybe an outhouse. Although even there, I think that there's room for improvement in design. And it's the first problem I give students. The function. Well, the function's so very simple, we don't have to worry about functionalism. It's the monumentality of the building that's important.
You have often said that the drive for monumentality is as fundamental, I think, you said, as the drive for food and sex.
Oh, well, I second, shall we say. The drive for monumentality, I feel, is inborn. Ladies wear shoes that aren't comfortable, but the ones they think are good-looking. They prefer to be thought smart-ass than they would to be thought practical. You know what ground gripper shoes look like, those horrible shoes they mold on your feet? You wouldn't be seen dead in those things. They're very comfortable. You're all wrong, by the way, to teeter on these heels that came down a few years ago and now going, heaven's sakes, up again. Doesn't make any difference. If you think you're better looking that way, more monumental, more acceptable, more beautiful, that's what you do. And I think that is an inborn feeling, you see? And that expresses itself by further out your clothes, further out your decoration of your apartment, further out to your decoration to the creation of your cities, to the creation of a country. We're in a very low point right now in city building. It's a shame, but we did have one great century, which Barbara Lee and I are trying to do something about, the 19th. We don't have much 18th in New York to worry about. But the end of the 19th century was the great period here, McKinney and White. Two great periods to my mind, Barbara Lee. I don't know what you think. You must talk now. The 90s and the 20s. The 90s are the post-Richardson, McKinney and White period, all the way to Columbia University Library, things like that. And then in the 20s, we got the great building like the Radiator Building, Daily News Building, ending at Rockefeller Center. And then it got pretty darn bad after the last war. The 40s and 50s, 3rd Avenue, for instance. I think you'd have an awful time finding a good-looking building on 3rd Avenue or 6th Avenue. Especially the new Rockefeller Center buildings they're recent, but they don't inspire you in any way. But you see practically any building from, there's another great period, of course, the cast iron period. What am I talking about? The whole of Soho is just a preserved, thank God, place. I remember before anybody was there. Did you ever wander down there before the rush?
Yeah.
It's so funny to go back and find all those people there. There weren't any people there. It was just lofts and trucks and horses. But we could see the beauty of those the columns and windows. It was just fantastic.
There was a time not so long ago that surface ornamentation, I guess, or any kind of embellishment was pretty close to a dirty word.
That's a dirty word. We came in on a wave of reaction against the Art Deco, against revivalism, against using Georgian details. We thought it was dishonest, that we were very honest in those days. We're not so honest anymore. And we believed that the important thing was structure, expressing structure. A Seagram building, for instance, every column evenly spaced, and that column holds that building up. Don't care anymore. I'm doing a building on Madison Avenue, and it has a few little extra columns because I needed. Well,
in fact, you made reference before to hypostyle
yes.
Columns.
Yes,
I think
because
that
it's
little
nice
building
to walk among columns.
that Mr. Johnson is referring to is the yet-to-be-announced plan for the AT&T building on Madison Avenue and 55th Street. Perhaps you might give us a little preview of what that building is.
Well, that's in my new backward-looking mood, preservationist mood. It's the opposite of a glass box. It's all granite. It has nice small windows. The main shaft of it reminds of a little switch, or maybe the radiator building, the ins and outs of the granite with the windows. Then at the bottom, there's a 70-foot high hypostyle hall that has a lot of columns, which you wander among. But 70 feet high, the lobby is above that. So the whole thing is on a mass of great, not these little pilotis, thin little columns, as thin as you could make them, because we believed in honesty, you know, so naturally we had to make our columns as small as we could. Now we make them as important as we can. So these are 5 by 5 columns, and they're, the whole city takes life right through it and around it and in it. And it's just great, exciting. And then in the middle is an enormous arch, the height of it's 100 feet high. Arch like a cathedral. It's going to be a lot of fun. The top is a broken pediment. You've seen them on grandfather clocks and everything, or Chippendale brake fronts. So the whole top of the whole building goes like this, and there's a hole cut out of it. And the hole goes right straight through the building. And that's where the steam comes out, you know, when you've seen steam coming out the top of New York building. And at night that hole is lighted, so if you're anywhere you are, it's a very bright light will get you. Oh, it's very exciting. That'll start in the fall. But
what is the
there's details, you see. Yes. There's ornamentation, there's moldings, there's decorative shadowing that is part of all this, which we wouldn't have a few years ago, we wouldn't have wanted to do. But I noticed my eyes, I came down Fifth Avenue today, was caught by every building back of 1950. And then from then on, there's little thin straps and flat facades and no shadows, no details. You get bored before you start looking. It's just too bad, isn't it? So maybe we're coming into a nice new world where we can do anything we want. At the same time I'm doing that building, mind you, I'm doing a 1 million square foot building, which is large, in San Francisco. It's bigger than AT&T building, but it's all glass.
Is that the one that incorporates the city of Paris?
No, that's another one. This is ITEL.
Why don't you tell us for a moment about your new preservationist?
My preservationist efforts aren't going too well because the preservationists of San Francisco are a very ornery bunch. Just the way they are in every city. It's lucky they are.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Oh, yes, indeed. But I find myself strained now because I've got to keep the most beautiful thing we have in the West Coast is a
Perhaps you'd explain it to us, what the nature of the discussion is in San Francisco and how you plan to incorporate this city of Paris interior.
City of Paris is the name of a department store out there that burned in the fire, of course, the earthquake. Then was rebuilt in 1910. And in 1910, they put a Beaux-Arts domed room in that is just so delicious. Every floor is different. Every railing is different. The roof is all painted glass with ships, and it's a delight, that's all. And it was put in the middle of an older, uninteresting building. Now the preservationists, including me, of course, want to do everything to save it. The building can't be saved because it doesn't comply with the new earthquake laws. So what to do? Well, what we're doing is taking that dome piece by piece, the whole room, every detail, every piece of color to be painted and put away, and brought back and replaced in our new building. All we're doing as architects is making a setting like for a diamond for this beautiful old room. And that would not have been possible a few years ago. But you see, so strong is public opinion in San Francisco, it forced Neiman Marcus, not known for their philanthropy, known for other things, Hisen and Hearn, but not philanthropy. But this is a fantastically expensive deal. which the people of San Francisco forced on a commercial venture.
So you're reminding us again
they're
that
a little
there's
ahead of us.
a constituency out there that is becoming increasingly vocal and
That's right.
visible.
That's
Otherwise,
right.
that really would not have
It
been
wouldn't
possible.
have happened, no.
Because it is a very expensive venture.
But why not? Who's more equipped to pay for that kind of thing? So I think it
There
all
may be
ended
an
up a good
alternative
story.
who's more equipped. You mentioned earlier the pause to refresh, and this is not only a pause to refresh, but to renew. Perhaps you might tell us about this 10,000 paned glass building. Perhaps we should hold it up because it's a little low.
It's more important to show it to the cameras than it is to the people.
The people are first.
They can see it anywhere. So you can see it's sort of diamond. You can see it reflecting around the room. It's a star-shaped building. It's hard to see how enormous it is. It's longer, higher, and wider than Notre Dame in Paris.
It's the world's first drive-in church.
Yes, the drive-in section isn't much. This is a 100-foot-high door here that opens very slowly on beautiful hinges, and then there's the preacher talking to the 500 or 600 cars that are parked outside.
We should locate it. It's the Crystal Cathedral, the Garden Grove Community Church in California, near Anaheim, is that?
That's right. It's the Matterhorn of the Disneyland, if you've ever been out there. It's right nearby. Next time you go to enjoy yourself at Disneyland, why just go down and look at this? Because this is slightly larger
This
than
has
the Matterhorn.
sequential elements, too, and the space is organized in that same way that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, but you cannot see it here at all. But what it'll do, it acts as a great... It would look much like that, actually. There are no columns. It's all great space frame, and thousands and thousands of little white pipes that connect it all up. I can't wait for it. It's 400 feet long. That's 2 New York blocks. Yeah.
What is the date of completion of that church?
3 years from now. We're just digging.
I guess you have often designed against what is considered a conventional grain. I'm thinking of those trapezoidal buildings in Houston.
Oh, Houston.
Pennzoil Place.
Yeah, Pennzoil Place, those 2 buildings that sort of hover over each other like this. Yeah, I was down there yesterday. It's now the symbol of the city. I mean, if you want to say Houston somewhere, you see these buildings. It's strange how it caught on. Well, that's in this mood, of course, of using sculpture at an architectural scale, large scale for impressiveness, and it works. I mean, I was amazed in Texas, where you can do almost anything, not like the rest of the country at all, where we put the buildings so close together that they overlap each other all the time, except you go around these freeways. It's good automobile architecture, I just realized. You come in, and then all of a sudden the building just cuts itself in 2 like that.
There is a space between the
Space
two.
between 2 buildings, but it's so small, they touch like this, points. See, so as you see it, then it's gone again. It's very, very interesting. I hope this will be, but you can't tell till they're built. See, architects you can't make into models, because that's just a silly little toy. But it should be at 100 feet, 120 feet high. It should be very impressive.
I thought models were one of the crutches of architects.
She's read more than I have in my own work. It's lucky I just did the proofs of my book, or I wouldn't know what you were talking about.
Now, let's tell them what we're talking about. About 20-some-odd years ago, Philip Johnson delivered a, I guess now famous lecture called The 7 Crutches of Architecture.
Yeah.
It was a lampoon on Ruskin. Perhaps you'd like to update those crutches for us.
Oh, I still think they're valid. I think.
Why don't you tell all of us?
I don't remember though. Do you? The crutch of the
economy. I don't remember all 7, but they're right on the
Look, if you're not a very good architect, you have to have a crutch
the clients
to
need
get you through. You see, and one of them I remember was serving the client. If the client wants a Gothic door here, or
we give them a Gothic door.
Give them a Gothic door in a modern building. So what? Aren't you supposed to serve the public or your client? Sure. See, so you get out of having to make a decision of whether that is a good design or not a good design. Yeah, the worst crutch is cheapness, because you can say, well, I had to build it that way because my clients didn't want to spend the money. Of course, I use it all the time. We all use all these crutches. But that's a very, very bad one, and you should be able to build even though it's with modest sums. The crutch of models, drawing I use, not models, because we were all pro models in those days. The crutch of a beautiful drawing. See, in my day, 20, 30 years ago, if you made a beautiful drawing, it would seduce you into thinking the building was good. There's no way you make a drawing of a building. The building has to be good in 3 dimensions. Can't make it a drawing or a facade or a rendering. So
the only way to
one.
look at a building is to look at a building.
Is to look at a building. The only way to build it is to build it. It's too bad. It makes it hard.
Perhaps another developer thought they were getting a modern architect. When you were asked to design the facade of that controversial building on Fifth Avenue opposite the Metropolitan Museum of Art, after long and heated community debate,
Protest, that's right.
Rather than just a developer building, the combination of the Landmarks Commission, the Municipal Art Society, and a group of citizen activists especially, banded together to redesign that building. However, it might have been too little too late in some ways, but at the 11th hour they called upon you to design a facade that was in some way compatible with its image across the street, the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
It was difficult because the building, you've probably been up to Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue recently. It's much too tall for the site because it's right next to a McKinley and White apartment house of 11 stories, and it's 22 stories. Very thin, tall facade, which had been designed with all glass. Of course, you have to have glass on the park, was his obvious reaction.
That's what you taught him
place.
in 1932.
I know. Oh,
and they're the effects of that.
And the effects of that. I had to tell him that glass facing west is just lethal, and that the last thing you do want to hang pictures, and you can't hang pictures on glass, because the tenants of Olympic Towers are now finding out. And so most of the decorators cover up a good deal of the glass. It's amazing. So I reduced the windows to more proportions of the old New York, and I stole a lot of moldings from the buildings on either side. What I would do, for instance, I would take a molding, a great big one, half round, Taurus molding, from the McKinley and White building, carry it right across my building. Well, of course, it would hit at the wrong place. I just chopped it off and started it again. I mean, it's that kind of a semi-whimsical thing. I couldn't really make a great new building out of it. The structure was up.
And what is the material?
It's stone, the same stone as the McKinley and White building next to me. And then I had a problem at the top. Most New York apartment houses just cut it right off about here. There's no room for hair or topping of any kind. Well, I didn't like that. And then they stick the water tower, as you know. Water towers. Can't we do something about water towers? They sit up there. They're legal, I know, but there must be some other way. Anyhow, so there, I had that terrible problem at the top. So I put a flat, I only get about 3 feet deep to work with, so I put a flat mansard. You probably saw it in the Times if you remember. A flat mansard up in front, well, fake front, held up by...
Had you ever done that before?
Nobody ever will again. I mean, it's like a Western town, you know, they put up these great high things and brace them up with 2x4s. They're up already. Next time you go up Fifth, just look at it. So, but I think you have to be slightly light about these things, but I'm very pleased with the results. And it gave me a chance to work with moldings that I never had. I mean, this was a brand new world, a very exciting world. The stone, for instance, how do you cut stone? How thick is the stone? How do you go around a corner with a piece of stone? What is the effect of a 10-inch round molding? Well, is the sun out or isn't it? You see, I mean, what kind of a shadow does it do when there isn't any sun out? It still has great power. Okay? So it'll be interesting to watch. That's going up right now. But you see, that's the result of the new. Barbara Lee and I were discussing it on the phone the other day. The change in sensibility, the change of the consumer. I'm just follow along the popular demand, of course. We're just, artists are only froth at the top, like after Abex you got Johns. Well, it wasn't so much that Johns invented anything, or Rauschenberg, but they expressed what was seething underneath of Abex all that time. Not that Abex stopped.
Abstract expressionism.
Yeah, I think they're all familiar
But we were
with
in
words.
the architectural term, I just
Oh, yeah, well, here we go
yes.
back into painting. De Kooning is not the less a painter because he never followed around doing Johnsian images. He's still maybe the greatest American painter. But he goes right on his, and at the same moment, we go through the whole Warhol thing over here and the Johns thing over there. Well, the changing of the acceptability, the changing, oh, look at the neorealists, for goodness sakes. Their prices are higher than the abstract people now. So it's great. The marketplace is a very good gauge in a strange way. It's this developer, this group of Fifth Avenue citizens that came to him at the same time that wanted me to do it, at the same time that I wanted to do it. See, these are sensibilities that nobody but a Susan Sontag could pull apart and find out what really is in the air. But the fact that Barbara Lee's writing this book, the fact that she's on, I guess you're on all the commissions there are by now, and that we all should be on the same wavelength is unheard of, you see, because the people that wanted to go back, as we used to say, to Mead and White were the enemy in my day. You see, we have to be progressive. Oh, do we have to be progressive? Well, that sounds funny just to say that now. None of us believe in progress anymore. That sort of got put on a shelf along with lots of other ideas we thought were sacred, you know, that everything's getting better and better. Oh, is it? Everything gets, I don't think better and better. It gets changed all right, but it doesn't get better and better.
I guess for a long while you've been known as a bit of a gadfly and a maverick to the profession.
Peck's bad boy.
However, Peck's bad boy is about to be awarded the gold medal of the AIA this coming May.
Imagine.
What are you going to tell them?
I wish you'd tell me what to tell them. I've insulted the profession and everybody in it for 50 years. I can't very well say I didn't mean it. And yet, but now I'm absurdly grateful that they have found me worthy of a gold medal, you see. So I can't say thank you, but I can't say, you damn fools. I can't do a Frank Lloyd, you know what Frank Lloyd Wright said when he got the gold medal? He said, it's about time. Very simple answer, I'm not that arrogant.
But here you are in the most austere company, both Saarinen, Louis Sullivan, Frank Lloyd Wright, even though you called him the best architect of the 19th century.
That's all right, he forgave me.
As I recall, the subject of that May AIA meeting is a time to learn. Will you have to address yourself to that as well?
No, but that gives me a clue, why don't I? See, that gets me off the subject.
It seems to me that one of the important things is really the re-education of architects as well.
I'll talk to the uses of Mead and White, huh?
That'll surprise them.
Yeah.
You say that architecture at the moment, one of the recurring themes of our conversation is filled, it's a period of eclecticism and pluralism. You also said that it is, not only said, your life has reflected the fact that you think that it is important to record historically, but also to push ahead in new directions. Where do you see us going now?
I can't see. That's the other thing that we're very bad as prophets. Historians and architects both make bad prophets. But naturally, we would foresee it in our own image. I mean, I would say, well, obviously the directions I'm working in are going to be the great ones. But it isn't true. So when Frank Lloyd Wright thought he was the last architect, he didn't see any point in bothering with the future. What do you mean? We were there, Michelangelo and Wright, and you had it. Well, we can't be that arrogant. His day, you could be a little more arrogant. But I can't see out of the present chaos. No, what I wish would happen is that there'd be a little more art in architecture and less commercialism, less business, less building just for the smallest buck. For instance, housing is our greatest need in this country. We could build easily 3 or 4 times as much as we are, and housing would mean new cities, and new cities would make a chance to create new plazas, new congeries of housing units. It only takes the will. We have the material, we have the labor. Labor is not used in this country to anywhere near the fullest extent. We don't have the will. We have the will to make billions of dollars worth of bombers and spread them around the world for peace. I understand. But we don't have the will to do anything about our cities and our housing. I really don't quite understand why not, because I've always had it, and I think everybody should join me. I think it's a noble and very simple-minded thing. How about applying to the federal government for an equal amount for the Department of Defense and the Department of Housing? That would give us, what, $100 billion this year? Oh, what, I couldn't build for $100 billion, right?
Well, you have spent a lot of your time in the past designing houses and museums and smaller scale things. But now you're taking on larger and larger commercial commissions. Does that mean that your own vision of the city has changed? And I mean, does that imply that you feel cities and their commercial needs rather than individual buildings are really the problem that we have to address ourselves to?
I don't think there's any question. I think all of us architects feel it can't be solved on an individual level, or whether it can be solved on a commercial level or not, I don't know. I build commercial buildings because that's what people ask me to build. I'm as close to the oldest profession in the world as you can get. In other words, you hire me to build a small building, I build a small building. You hire me to build a big building, I build a big building. But I just wish that my client would be the federal government. L'architecte du roi is always what I've always wanted to be. I mean, some future democratic Louis that would want to build cities, you see. It isn't that we lack anything to do it with either, you see. We have the architects. We have very good architects, especially the young ones. But we don't have the clients.
The architecture critic of the New York Times said it best, that Philip Johnson is an intensely urbane man who began by studying history and has ended up by making it. Thank you very much, Philip Johnson, for being with us tonight.